Right, so we've got some really gorgeous fruit sweets and in wrappers because I thought it'd be really lovely as to bring in some really nice colour this week and particularly to focus how the light catches with these wrappers because it's one of those things actually we're always trying to capture the light. So with particularly with sweets where there is a lot of wrapping, you get all of these fabulous kind of light bouncing off everywhere. So you can you can do this from life if you want and have a little stack of sweets there, or you can, use one of the pictures. I've used this one and I've just chopped an image down slightly so that so I can just focus a little bit more on these here. But by all means, you can have a go at doing all of them. It just takes a bit longer, that's all. So I've just got a few sweets here, really just so we can observe how that light does hit. And obviously we're very reliant when we're looking at any picture where it's not in life, we need to kind of look at where the main source of light's coming, where it's bouncing off because and it's really handy anyway to just kind of have a look at where the shadows come underneath, where the light source isn't. So in my studio, I've got lights on the top and they're coming from that way and they're coming from that way. But over the top, not behind me really. So that's typical of what we're seeing here, that we've got these kind of the light coming in, but there's obviously no windows or anything in that have got any light coming in. So sometimes we get little light shadows and things cast from the windows as well within the wrapper, which is interesting, but not here tonight, just literally from the source down. So it is really interesting to just look at where you get all the shapes and things that you get. And I think that's one of the things when we actually start to pop these top layers on that we'll really focus into is all the different shapes that they make and the tones of those shapes. We'll have to, as we get to the very top layer, start to look at what kind of colours these are. Are they bright white or are they slightly more translucent? So it may be that what we'll do as we get to these last layers over the top is start to maybe have some paint that's slightly watered down, that's not got quite as much white in it, and then some real pops of white. But we're looking at all of these different shapes that come over the top of the sweets. So obviously these ones are flat, these are a bit more kind of rectangular, but I'll just move them over to the side for a moment. So I did actually this morning prep my board with a different colour. If you want to leave it a light colour, you can. The only thing I would say is if it's light, it's more difficult to put a white over the top. So I went in with just kind of a slight tint, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm not going to really draw this out just because it can take a bit longer. But if you find that it's easier to put in the negative spaces, the spaces between to create the shapes of things, then by all means, if you want to paint them like that in there, put that tint in there first to create the shape, then by all means do that, because some people just find that much easier to actually put the negative space in and then not having to draw the sweets then. But I'm going to just go for a full over tint, which we haven't actually done for a while. So it depends what colour you want, but I'm going to go for, and have some white on here anyway. I'm going to mix a tint with a white, but you can even go for a bright as well. You can even change the colour of these sweets. It's pretty much, we like to explore and experiment with all of these. Just got to get this paint out for a moment. There we go. So I'm going to go for, I think this morning I had a bit of a peachy colour, but you can put anything in, anything at all. So not sure how. I may even have a bit of a contrast today. So I think I'll go for a contrast. These sweets are all kind of these are fairly warm. Obviously the purple's a little bit different. So I may even just go in with like a bluey or a turquoise tint, but you can make a tint with any colour you want. And you can go much lighter. I'm going to get this out anyway so I can mix some purple. I'm going to go in for, and this one's just ultramarine, but you could use phthalo and see what kind of purple that gives you. I'm also going to pop some red down because I mixed my own purple earlier, but if you've got a purple colour and you wanting to go kind of this colour, that's absolutely fine, this burgundy colour. It's more of a red base, isn't it, than it is a blue. But there is a touch of blue in it. What else? So yeah, it's just deciding on the colour that you want to go. I think I'm going to go in, as I said, I'm going to go in with a colour that's a bit cerulean-y, cerulean blue tint. But if you haven't got a cerulean blue, you know, just choose any colour that you want to kind of mix up a little bit of background with. This really, I think, is about choice. We're going to be painting those over the top anyway, these, you know, lovely wrappers and things as we get to those final layers. So I'm just going to mix something up. Might be handy to have this handy. And then, so I'm going to go in with just a nice bit of white. And again, as I said, the strength of the tint is entirely up to you. If you want to go bright, there's no reason you can't. I'm just going to go, I think, make sure you've got a test bit where you can test as well if you're not sure about what colours you want to go for. I'll have to mix up a fair bit if I'm going to cover the whole background. But if you're just using, you know, if you're just painting those negative spaces between where the shadows are, you don't need to. I'm not going to go too intense actually. Make it dark enough so I can see the white going over the top of it. So there's not a huge contrast, but now if you prefer drawing it out, that's fine. You can work between it. But as I said, I'm just going to go in. And then I am going to make sure, I'll test it, that's fine. I'm just going to go in with a nice, just drop some water in. I'm going to go in with a nice flat brush and just get that background in. Just, I like a flat because it gives a really nice coverage, generally. And it depends, a lot of this kind of drying time, to be honest, will very much depend on how warm your area is. If you're in a really kind of nice warm space, it will dry much faster than say when it's cooler. So I'm not worrying too much, to be honest, about having a perfect background because we're not going to see a lot of it. You know, sometimes if we're doing a sky or something, we might think a bit more carefully about how we're applying it. But of course you can, if you want to be really carefully, that's absolutely fine. But just it should feel really easy to go on. If it's starting to drag or something like that, and just apply more paint and a bit more water. Because ideally you want to be able to kind of get it to glide on. It feels nice. I'm just going for it now with this. Clearly I haven't mixed enough up. So I'm just kind of working it all together really, just in a big just kind of moving it around whilst it's still wet because you can see I've got quite a bit of paint on there really, just so I can move it. Which is the beauty of a flat brush actually, and kind of get it to move the way you want it to, which is nice. Just enjoy that kind of getting back into that lovely painting process because it's lovely, isn't it? I have missed it last week, I have to say. Nice to just get back into the flow and your kind of brush strokes as well. You don't have to go side to side or up to down, you know, down you can kind of put some nice movement into there if you prefer. I've just got a little bit of tape around the outside, just that when I take it off, it'll feel a bit more like a frame. But it's as much to hold it still, if anything else. And I'm not really varying, and some quite often I'll say, you know, have a go at varying the background, but I'm not going to with this because there's going to be so much going on with these wrappers over the top that I don't really think it's necessary on this occasion to kind of do too much with the background. Otherwise, it will be a bit, might be a bit overwhelming, a bit much to look at. So when you've got that in, it's just thinking then about, you know, thinking about the placement of sweets. Now, as we've always done before, if it's easier for you to kind of put a grid on so that you can work out how big you want your sweets, and this is whichever one you're doing. So if you're doing the full amount of sweets, then obviously there'll be more in each section, which is going to be quite, and I'm going to translate this to here. You don't have to put this grid on, by the way, though. And it's not too worried, and it sounds a bit strange like doing it over the top, but actually it's going to go over the sweets anyway. So, but you know, if you feel more comfortable at this point, not using this grid, then just don't use it. If you're kind of just getting started with proportion and everything, then it's quite helpful because you can see kind of where everything's going. So that's just going to be drying out. It's quite wet at the minute, but you can use your pencil over the top whilst it's drying. I would just say don't do it too deeply because once we put the other colour on, you don't want that kind of scrubbing up underneath. But I'll do mine nice and darkly so you can see it. So I'm just going to go for this centre one it's kind of like just deciding, isn't it, to start somewhere. So I'm going to go for this centre sweet that comes down here. Now, I know that there's all of these twisty turny bits of the wrapper overlapping. I'm not actually going to do anything with those. I'm just getting the main shapes at the moment of where the sweets are. And because the wrapper really over the top of the sweets is the last kind of thing that we will approach when we're layering up. So I'm just going to get this green sweet in. So I'm starting that a little bit further down to allow for this extra bit that goes over the top. Just working out, you know, which bit's wrapper and which bit's sweet, really. That's kind of the flat end of that. And you might not be able to see where all of it goes. You've just got to kind of guess, really. But if we're not sure, just try a bit of guesswork. One seems like the biggest one there. And then, you know, with anything like this, it makes it much easier then to start looking at, you know, if you've got one, the biggest one there, how does that one fit in and how does that one fit in? Because you can just kind of go outwards, I think. As long as you know that you're going to definitely fit the others on, that's the biggest thing. So I'm just going to pop a few marks just to make sure this is coming down to where I want it to. And again, with the pencil, it doesn't mean because we've made a mark, we have to keep with that. We can always move these marks as we go. It's not a problem at all. Never too late to make a change with, with ours. And then can't see all of this here. I'm just going to kind of paint this kind of funny shape that's coming underneath here. And then this one here. So just work your way through and just, it's really, really fantastic to see all of the shapes underneath. So I'm probably going to change that shape a little bit as I go, but it's fine for now. What else have we got? Got this one here. Now, keep working your way through it. It might take a little bit off your paint off your board, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to be painting that bit anyway. Keep working your way through, see what shapes and things there are. Yeah, I'm looking at this one now, thinking this one's actually a bit smaller. Well, it's this one that's actually a bit bigger. Just keep adapting it. So it's helpful anyway when we're kind of sketching out where all of these sweets go, because it just gives us an extra bit of drying time. Not much drier now. That's not because it's lifting. But what it does give us a chance to do as well is then to think, okay, when I've placed it, then what do we need to think about? So like if we were to approach doing glass, we need to think about kind of building some of these layers up. So what we're looking at are we're going to work bottom to the top as we would, like obviously we've done the background where the table or the surface is, and then we've got to look at the colours underneath the wrapper. So the wrapper, like glass, when we're attempting glass, we do all the colours we can see through the glass first or in the glass. And then eventually we'll put these little bits over the top. So it's thinking about, really kind of zoning in, and it's a great observation activity actually is this, because within this purpley colour, this kind of obviously blackcurrant flavour, isn't it? Within there you can start to see there's all sorts of different shades, and it's deciding, how am I going to represent that? Well, I mean, to start with, I would just think about using one mid-tone, just get that in. Then once we've got a kind of a midish tone in, we can start thinking about the shadows in there, which are much darker. The bits that are in the shade that are down this end, aren't they, mainly, or like where it's sunken in the middle a little bit. Sometimes it's where you get a bit of a sweet that's a bit chipped as well, don't you? And you'll get a bit of a, it's a darker edge or whatever. So that's what we're looking for. So each of these colours, mid-tones, will have, and then you might even have a bright colour on there, which will lift it a bit. So when I was doing this morning, I was seeing kind of a red colour in some of these and almost a pinkish tone in some of the others. So again, it's down personally to what we actually see. So what I'm going to be doing is just working through really with a mid-tone, and I'm going to mix up a shadow as I go with each one. So I'll start with this purple because that's what I've started with there. But again, if you want to use a different colour, then just go for it. Use the colours you really want. If you want to use reds or you want to, liven it up a bit or whatever, absolutely go for it. So I do have a purple, but again, it's thinking, the purples that we've got, it's quite almost burgundy, isn't it? So this one, when I looked at this, it might be great for a highlight, but it's really not kind of that colour, unless you obviously want to go for the purple. I might use this to mix for a highlight on the darker sweets. Now it's not going to look like sweets until right near the end. So I know I keep saying that, but it really is true with this, because even if we get one wrapper in place, it still doesn't feel like a wrapper because there's so many bits to it until you've got a group of them with wrappers on. So that's the other thing to consider. So really don't worry about, thinking, oh, there's no way it's going to do anything. It will. So I'm going to go in here and just make up kind of a ready bluey purple. Let's use this one, see what I get to. And again, it will depend on the colour you use. So if you use a different red, for example, so this is coming to the colour actually. This is why testing it is really good, because that doesn't look anything like the colour actually. I'm just going to go in. I test that on the board. That's kind of like the darker side of it there. That looks much darker on the pad. So it's just having a test and playing about with, you know, maybe more red in one area of your purple, or you might have more blue, and it's just a trial and error. So just mix small amounts up until you're absolutely sure what you want to go with. You may even add a tiny bit of white as well, where it's much lighter and you want kind of this, you know, where you want a bit more warmth in there, where it feels like you've got a slightly different mid-tone in there. So I'm just mixing up a couple of things for this red sweet, just having an explore. One's got a bit more red, one's got a bit more blue, and that's got a touch of white in it as well. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of water in. Now again with this, middle section as well, so I've got a bit in the middle. Just kind of trial and error. Just go in and have a go. You want it dry enough, you want your background dry enough so it's not lifting off. And you may need to put it on a bit more thickly depending on your acrylics, because some acrylics cover really well and other acrylics take a bit more to cover. So don't worry if yours needs a bit more to cover. You can always go back and pop a little bit more on. But yeah, put plenty on if you're trying to, if they're a bit more translucent. They really do differ. Even the heavy-bodied ones, which are supposed to be really heavy, really differ again. And sometimes when they are really heavy-bodied and they do cover, they're quite difficult to manoeuvre. So just falling against each one. So that's obviously quite a flat colour. I'm going to go in whilst it's a bit damp, and I'm just going to go and try and work in some of this shadowy bit of it, just see what happens. So what I'm doing is I'm observing on there any shadowy areas, dark ones. And it might be that you don't see these until later on, that's absolutely fine. Let's go a bit more in here. Shadowy one. You don't have to do it whilst it's wet either, you can wait until it dries a bit. But like I was saying, sometimes you have to go in and put a little bit back because you might think, oh, now there's a light bit. It's causing a reflection underneath and I couldn't see that. But we can only go with what we can see, and sometimes we just have to go back. So if you're putting on any little details, then obviously that's a good time. If you want to downsize your brush a little bit, then by all means go in with a smaller brush. Try to find that. But, you know, a lot of this is going to be covered over as well. But it does feel quite disjointed at this point, but don't worry, that's fine. So whilst I'm still working on this colour, I'm actually going to go in because it feels to me like that's quite ready. So I'm going to try the colour I've mixed. If it's not bright enough, just on certain areas, I feel like there's a pop of colour. So I think I've said this before, don't be frightened of just trying it and putting a bit of pop colour. It could be orange or it could be red or something like that. Sometimes it can just create a real lift or even a bit of pink or something. Just have a little go and see. I think I'm going to get some, I might try a bit of pink before actually. Or you could just mix a bit of, you could actually just mix a bit of red and, doesn't want to play today, my paint. I'm looking at right, Jill's getting it out. Right. We'll forget the pink. We won't be using the pink today. I'll try a bit of red and a bit of white there. That's better. Okay. Right, so I'm going to go in with this slightly lighter colour here, where I'm just seeing this kind of just slightly lift underneath. And pop that. Now I've popped this on quite thickly actually because my paint's a little bit translucent here. So I'm just going to pop in where I can see a few of these brighter colours. I'm putting them in. Now it looks a bit strange because we've got nothing over the top. Once we've got some of these sweet wrappers and things over the top, it'll make a lot more sense. So we've got to just kind of overlook the untidiness of it really. And then I'm going to do the same and go and do all the rest of those colours that I've already got mixed up and work on those and start to get those things in. So it's a darker one on that side. And just literally kind of looking at some of these brights, seeing what we can see. All these duller colours. And it all makes sense nearer, further on down the line. When we put the white over the top, it will feel really intense anyway. Just mixing about. Amazing what you see in it, isn't it? Really nice colours in there. Just making sure these kind of shadows are in there so we don't flatten everything down at the last minute. Oh, so it's the same thing, just observing all those different tones. I mean, some of them are less obvious. The yellow, I can't see too much difference in those colours, but I might, just add a bit of like a bit of a highlight or something in it. So we're just going through and laying all of those down. So this is where it'd be good, handy to have a bit of clean water as well. If you've been putting like the blue toned ones on and then you go to the yellows, you'll want to make sure that your yellow ones are kept nice and clean. So, I've got the yellows and oranges. So obviously, if you've not got any orange, you can mix that, can't you? Use a red and then add a little bit of either lemon yellow or a warmer yellow like Cadian. I've used the Cadian yellow. And this one's Azo yellow. All got different names. I do have some red, so I could make an orangey with it, or I can just go in with another orange as well, and then add a little bit of red or yellow to that to make it darker or lighter. I'm just kind of thinking about that before I go on to thinking about the green. And I know I'm working ahead, it's just I can stop and chat to you. Let me see. So, yeah, and I've used a round brush with these sweets just because I find it easy to sweep in with the point. You can get that point nice and round. So with the yellow, you can move that paint really nicely over. A lot of that white is covering over the top, but if you can't see where to leave the gap, don't worry. Just paint the whole thing in yellow, and then we can paint over it with that wrapping. And again, depending on how translucent your paints are or opaque, you might need a couple of layers on. Just completely depends on the individual paints. You can always add a bit of white anyway to with a tint. Does do the trick sometimes, make it a bit more unique. It's fascinating when you really start to look at all these colours, it's amazing. But if you don't like the colour, by all means, just change it for something you do like. We can always adapt the colour just with different tones applied to it. Pop down a little there. Just so I'm not thinking about too careful. And if there are any slight changes, like when you might get just a very slight darker area or whatever, then I'm just adding a little bit of some slightly more orange in there just for test. But you might not be seeing that, so I'll just try and begin the middle. Things like the oranges, it's more obvious to see where you've got this much darker bit and then this where this light just kind of hitting the top of the disc as well. So we can get those on. I'm going to use some of this yellow just for the top. Down on the canvas of the board. Okay, that. Still create some nice shapes and things underneath, because I mean, what we're doing really, we're kind of doing the scaffolding. So we're popping the scaffolding in so that when we're ready, we just kind of can layer up all of this paper really easily. So I'm just bringing a little bit of lighter colour into here. A few pops of light around the top. There's nothing as stopping putting our brushwork a little bit underneath, even with the, the other areas over the top. Same with the sweets over here. It's slightly lighter, so I'm going to actually put a bit of black water in there, a little bit of white in there. Then we can just use an orange on its own down here, or we can actually just go in with a, we can even darken that down a little bit more with a red colour. It's interesting how the colours do kind of fuse into each other a bit, don't they? Because they've not got a really hard edge. Any of the slight kind of shadows or whatever, just pop them in. Or slight changes in the colour. Keep going. What other colours you've got in there? It's more of the same or ones. All the prep work that we're doing, it doesn't feel anything like a suite at this stage because we're literally working backwards, aren't we? You know, our brain's going to be like, oh, crikey, what is going on here? But we know that it will be fine. Not to overlook how strange it's looking at the moment without the wrapper on. Because we're not even just drawing a sweep. This particular one, there is one on there where you can see the shapes of the sweep. We're actually drawing a sweep through a wrapper without the top wrapper on. So it's even more abstract really to our brain because we're kind of like trying to work out what's underneath it. So we're not even drawing like just a smooth sweep. There's all these other shapes and things happening, which can make it feel quite confusing. So just keep popping it in, popping the shadows in. I'm going a little bit darker with my shadows over this, so I'm actually going in with a bit more of a red rather than just an orange. We'll see if it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's fine. I'm going to continue to experiment, even if it doesn't quite work out. I want it to. It'll be okay. We'll have a go. All we're doing as well, we'll think about this at the weekend, is organising our thoughts on paper. In one way, and then we might do it another way another time, but it's all good. I do think as well, the more we start to play with things like this, with our artwork, the more we start to play with other things in our everyday life as well. I'm absolutely convinced. So let's see what else. There's another orange one down there. So just, just as I said, we're just working through. It's a bit of a process really, and it's a process where I can guarantee at some point in the next 15 minutes we go, oh my gosh, I don't like that at all, which is absolutely fine because it doesn't make sense to us yet. Just doesn't. We're just needing to make sure we've got a few different tones in there. So it creates the shape. So those shadows will go back, you know, we know that they go backwards, don't we, to make it something feel a bit deeper, to put more depth in. But then the, you know, the lighter bits will pop forward a little bit. And it doesn't matter if you don't get every little bit now. You'll go back and think, oh yeah, I've missed that, or I feel like I need to put that back in. That's fine, we'll do that. Never too late to put those little marks back in. Right. So, you know, moving on again, you know, thinking about those types of greens and what type of green you've got in your kit. All these colours we can explore. We can have more yellow to make them warmer. We can add a bit of white to make them a bit more pastel-y colour. I've tended not to add much white really to the oranges, just so that we retain a little bit more of the brightness. That's the only thing we can lose adding the white, is the brightness of the colour, the natural colour. But we can play around with them and add, you know, say more yellow to them or something like that, and manage to retain some of the brightness through that. Like this one, that's a very, if I use that on its own, it's a very sap green. It'd be great for these highlights here on the edge, but actually this is much more yellowy, so I'm literally just going to go in with that. Just take the yellow, add a bit more yellow and then some more actually, until it feels more limey, acidic green. So it's definitely more yellow based than it is blue based. Very interesting actually, when you're thinking about colours. Colours of that we wear and things like that, you know, so sometimes warmer tones with yellows in don't suit us. And so we would go for like, if so I'm typically in that scale where I've had my course done a few months ago, or maybe it's quite longer than that now. And actually yellows doesn't suit me, which I didn't have any clue. Because there's too much, because I'm cool toned underneath. So when you start to look at it, it's things like this where they say don't have lime green. And we can see now exactly why, can't we? Because we're mixing more yellows into it. But blue greens like teals are really really suitable if you've got a cool undertone to your skin. So it's fascinating. It really does. It's really true. You can literally just do it from mixing it. So now we have got these limey greens and zested greens. You could do that with a lemon yellow. That would really make it punchy as well. I'll just keep adding some more till I get to where I want to. And it may be, I can't quite get it. Let's just test it. Oh yeah, it's getting there, definitely. So again, that's like good reason to test, isn't it? So without putting too much white or something in it. So I'm going to pop in some of these darker colours. If you've got a warmer undertone to your skin now, these warm colours with yellows and look fabulous on you. Science behind cool. Get some of these. these darker edges in. And just highlight on the top. Keep working. Just really enjoying looking at all these different tones in there. You can always kind of layer up a bit more too. It's really absorbing them. It's just like all these fabulous tones. I think I need to put a bit more of that one to make it a bit more. Where you can't really see what's going on, you just kind of have to make it up. You know, if something's overlapping, you think, oh, I'm not sure where that shape is. You can make it up. That's part of the artist's story you're telling, is your view of it. So it doesn't matter, you know, like sometimes people say, is it right or wrong? I'm like, well, when I say, what do you see? It's genuine. It's a genuine question because it's you're telling your story of it. Your viewpoint. Yeah, seeing any darker ones, just keep weaving them in. What you can see. Well, that's covered over, isn't it? Because it's just getting such a lot of light on it there. But again, you know, just tell your version of what you can see there. Too much. I'm just trying to kind of put in a few of these edges where I might just mix a tiny bit of white up with this, just to make some of it a little bit pastel here. And I'll just create a bit of the edge going, you know, so I can see kind of where it comes over. There's obviously, like on these ones, a little bit of a, when you look in, at the one that's slightly bigger, that version one I'm using, slight, you know, you can see that there's a slight dent in the middle of them. And I suppose you'd expect like that to be a bit dark. I'm seeing the pattern on a few of them here. Let me just see a bit, but it's there. and if you've got any pops of brights or anything there that you want to pop on whilst you're doing it, or like, if there is any bright yellows, or just pop that in there as well, like we did with the reds and things. Before we go over the top with any of those. And this is where, this is where the brain working things out is quite a powerful thing, because now we can go and go, right, for example, where now I know these are going down in the middle, I might just pop a little bit of a shadow in the middle of each one, just so that there's some consistency. And make it easier to kind of understand it. I'm just going to see how everyone's getting on while that dries a little bit, and we'll come back to that later. Just take a pause. So it's not, you're not expecting it to look like this finished piece of artwork at all. It'll be very kind of childlike at the moment, which is what you'd expect. But we're just putting those foundations down, making those solid underneath. So when you feel you've got, the foundations in place, then obviously we're going to start and start to build this up now. Build up your wrappers over the top, see, how how it builds up. And again, if it's very wet in places, I'm going to go back to probably start the ones that I did at the beginning, like the darker ones to start with, because these are still wet. And obviously I don't want to smudge it too much, because the thing with the wrappers over the top is we'll have some very light areas and some very like straight shapes. And then there'll be some other shapes that are, like little triangles. There's all sorts in there. So a lot of it is about capturing the shape. But also, we've then got to decide between them which are the brightest on there and which are not. And then how it all fits together over the top. So we've got we know if we start to look that these come right round the outside. So we almost need to take the outsides of these wrappers, and they're not it's not that clear. There's just enough little kind of slightly larger to be able to tell us. So that's telling me that the ones around the outside, and to some extent, some of the ones that are coming overlapping, where the ends of the sweets are, like obviously these are a bit different because they've got a thingy on them, like a stripe, but these are clear. So we're almost having to tell our story of where these come to if it's difficult to see. So like this one over this corner obviously comes out and it's coming underneath, and this one maybe underlaps a little bit. So it's just working out where it is, where the edge of it is, and then where the brights are and where the pulls in the wrappers are as well, these clear wrappers. So there is quite a bit to think about, but really what we're wanting to do is make sure we've got a good, I'm just gonna move this over here a moment. We want to make sure that some of it is not as bright. So we want to make sure, even on this little one here, for example, like that some of these are very bright and others are much more muted or a bit see-through, like these ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some white over this side. Hopefully it won't mix with that balloon now because it's dry. I don't want to over mix it so it pulls it up. And then I want to really thin this down. So this is the same principle almost as when we've done the clouds before. And we use a really thin down colour. So I'm going to try it over the top of the colour that I've already used on there that I've tested out, look, to see if it's translucent enough, and it's not, so I think that's actually fine. We can always make it brighter, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to go the other way this time. So this morning we were building up the bright bits, but I'm going to do it the other way around, just because there's different ways of doing it. And then starting to pop in some of these wrappers that come around the outside of it and kind of overlap just on the edge. So it shouldn't be the very brightest. I may even have to thin this down even a bit more, actually. Now it's going to look bright. This is the difficulty, it's going to look a bit bright on the camera. Because it's going to pick up the light, but it's not quite as bright. So what I can do here, if I wanted to as well, is I could mix a tiny bit of that blue tint with it as well. Just so it's going over the top of this going over the top of here. So I'm kind of trying to get the, so this is almost like the bits that you don't see as well, these bits here. The bits that are a bit more translucent. It's coming through a little bit. So I'm just going to try and create some of those, oh, it's too bright still, so I'm actually going to bring that down even more. There we go. And you won't know till you do it actually. So if you make a bit of an error with it, it's fine. Just either take it back off or just thin it down while it's on the paper. So I'm going to go in with these shapes over the top that are very, very thin down. So we're just getting a touch of it and then building up these last bits. Well, see, that's too bright. I only want that where it's supposed to be bright. So I'm going to take that a little bit up the middle there, keeping it nice and translucent so it's almost kind of coming over the top. We can brighten any of these bits up afterwards. It's just giving us a good start. So even here, we know there's something going on. So I've got the bits in that I kind of want to build up there. There's a bit suggesting that that's coming over the top of that sweet. The other thing is, just bear in mind, until we've got quite a few of these wrappers in place, it's still not going to feel like a wrapper because the brain is not going to tell us that that's what's happening. It'll just be confused, like, what is that thing in the corner that's different to everything else? But what, it's like, we're making connections about the shapes of the sweets and things like that. The brain will do that for us. So I'm now going to go in with the brighter, the bits that are much brighter. This is where you go in with the highlights, the really pure white bits in there. A little bit over here. And all I can do is copy the shapes that I'm seeing. That's a lot of what we do with the glass or the bits at the top. There's a little bit there and down. So it kind of, you're almost getting a sense that there's a shape in that packet. But again, as I said, it's not going to feel like, this one on its own, it's not going to feel like a sweet in a wrapper yet until we've got the others in place. So we need to get quite a few done. But I am going to now look at where this wrapper here has got the other light bits in it. So it might be a bit difficult to understand until we get more in place. We just got to go with it. And if you want to work round, so you're doing a few in one place, that's fine. Just make sure that they're dry enough. So again, I'm going to go in with a much thinned down version first until I build up the really brightest and lightest ones. And you can move it really easily around when it's very translucent like that. That's the beauty of it. Start to get in, and don't forget the wrapper that goes over the side of it as well. So you're getting that sense that it's kind of covering over a little bit. Start to make sense the more we get in. Even if it's going to take a little bit of building up. And then you can start, obviously, each bit building a little bit more, so you've got your brighter ones in there. This is quite a lot of brightness on this one, to be fair. And we're looking at, both directions, which direction each of these sweet wrapper is going in. Starts to cover over those sweets a little bit more. It starts to make more sense. So this can go off the end of the page. Just make sure you've got plenty on your brush. So it does, you get the brightest ones are right. Sometimes when you've got them going off the side and over the top as well, like that, it makes it more feel like, you've got this cover over the top of the sweets. Sometimes they dip down as well over that centre. Like this one seems to, the shape of it's dipping down and over the top, which is what, if someone's wrapped up like that, you'd expect that a little bit, wouldn't you? So at the moment, this is quite difficult to see what's going on with all this. So I'm going to go back in and just pop in some slightly brighter ones around where the edges. And actually try and create some sense that there is a wrapper there. So I might have to pop in a bit of a bit more information there, just with putting a few more lines. I may even have to pop a little bit of a shadow in between it as well. So let's have a little look at a little bit of this bluey colour behind. You can always use some of the background colour to put some shape behind it. Does that make sense? I'm going to go in here. And it's almost like it's casting a bit of a shadow. So this is slightly darker. So we're almost kind of creating a bit of a sweet shape there between. Help a little bit as well. I'm just going to move along now. It's quite wet, so I'm going to come back to that one later. I'm just going to keep working my way through, and we've got these going always, haven't we? I mean, this is just like almost look like it's been mixed up a lot. So making sure I'm going in with my thin ones. Make sure I'm not thin down. Just blot it off your brush a bit as well. I feel like I've got too much on. So I'm going to go back to this one here. Sure, I've got this bit going over the edges here to make it feel like it's coming over and overlapping. You know, you can work the other way. You can put on the bright ones first if you prefer that. It's difficult in here. There's so much, there's such like a mishmash going on here. I'm going in with the lighter ones here and just kind of going backwards and forwards because it's difficult to see what's going on. So I'm just going to create, this is where our own mark making is really important in just kind of trying to represent what trying to make sense of it with your own brush marks because it is difficult to see it. Again, we can see these layers. I'm trying to kind of just join things up a little bit. Just keep persevering. Even the slightly thinner ones. That was in thinner, paint, so it's a bit more transparent. Just over and over, doesn't it? There's so much going on this one in the middle. And then if it helps to make sense of it, just kind of show where those highlighted ones come on a little bit further. A lot of them join up as well. So you've got these quite linear shapes where the creases are. So it's where the light's hitting the crease, isn't it, a lot of the time? We can then work over these shapes a bit. Translucent over the edge. It'll still feel very odd at the moment, but that's okay. We just need several in place for it to feel like a group of something, like with the pebbles and the pebbles. Again, where you get these real kind of pops of them. Put those in. And again, if you're struggling to see underneath, what's going on here, then just put a little bit of background back in. And build up the white again. And come over the top. And that's the big thing, is getting that nice contrast. Keep working it round. Because the more we do, the more we'll see it's a pile of sweets. Those little folds over. And if you're not sure how dark to go, just start lighter and then start to, bring in some of the other colours with the sort of brightness of the colour. Okay, building up, building up. And again, if you're struggling to see it, just pop a bit of shadow behind, kind of on the outside side of where the sweet paper is. Create a bit of shadow there. It is difficult, isn't it? Because this one really kind of is a bit loose and over the top, but all we can do is do what we think. See, I'm going to take this one over here now. Now I've done this side. I'm going to take this paper and bring it quite brightly over the top of that one to create my own story, because I'm struggling to see it myself. So I'm going to build that as though it's coming up here. I'm going to just make sure I've got the brightest one on there, just by building up thick areas of white thicker. Kind of going over the edge as well of the sweet, so You can see where it's going. Just get it done. That's okay. Keep going round, keep popping in what you've got. Just notice if that needs to be quite right in there. Sometimes the pots are cold, we don't actually know the real brights, we don't notice them until we look back at one that we've just, another one where we've kind of really highlighted it. It does make a bit of a difference, I think. Not quite a lot of concentration, but it's worth it. Just gives us a different feel as to what it's like when it hits, all the different kinds of light hitting these wrappers. So I'm just making sure I'm bringing it right over the top and the edge. And then those little brights. Build it up again. These bright bits. Really picturing the light on this edge here. And this is the thing, it's like a process of seeing, isn't it? Don't see these at all when we're not looking for them. But once we start to really look for them, it's amazing, they just all kind of pop out at you. Yeah, it's kind of, we're starting now to see, aren't we, the difference, because we've got a few bits in place, but all this going on here, can't really see where the ends of this are. But again, it's just working out think that one is this one that's kind of twisted and turned on its edge, actually. So I'm going to try and recreate that, what I'm seeing, whilst I remember it. It feels, but again, you know, if you're seeing something different, do it your way, because we all see things in such different ways. I might be completely, what I'm seeing is completely different to someone else. That's fine. So I'm just going to get a few of these, got like this little bit there. Maybe I've got a bit too much in the middle there, so we'll just suck a bit up with a bit of tissue, so I can take a bit out if there's too much. Just drop a small amount in. And then start over here. There's kind of some fused bits underneath here. You get those fused bits. I'm just going to go in with a much lighter colour there. Bit of a fused one on the side here. It starts becoming, I think, easier as well, because the more you do it and you see it, you just become more comfortable with it. It's like anything, isn't it? Like any of the process. So I can see now this end is kind of coming over here. And then some that are a bit brighter. Keep going with that. I think that's almost a wrapper coming off this one here. That's really kind of difficult to see, but again, I'm just going to tell my story, what I'm seeing here. You should definitely do the same. Just making sure I'm not forgetting where I can see an edge overlapping something else, just so that we can see it does go over. And some of these contours at the side, you know, you can kind of take this and pull it round and make a bit of the shape of the side of something as well. It's quite handy. Same there. I'm just folding up some things from anything. Really, really absorbing this one. And then, you know, just keep going. So what is that over here? Again, just going in a bit softer to start with, like in that kind of the edge of that as well, kind of overlapping there. It's when you start to see each one independently, you can see how it connects a little bit easier, can't you? It's a bit damp actually, but I might just get away with that. A little bit too much. You see all those between the two there as well. Brown, well, building up those brights. And I think this is where it's starting to kind of like now become more obvious that we've got sweets in wrappers here. Because we've got this group, which at the beginning we would never have been able to see that happening because we were so far early on in the process that you think, oh, crikey, it's just never going to materialise. It just does. This one is having. I'm not sure, you know, where something is or ends. Just kind of make your own story with it. Working on it. And you can always go back over if there's anything else you've done and you think, oh, as you go through, just have a little look at some of the others. I think the hardest thing with them is the edges. We can't quite see where they go. And almost as well, sometimes when you start putting loads of colour down, you can't see. So you can always go back in, for example, if you're trying to just always go back in with a bit of the background colour. It's absolutely fine. Just to just so you can see where your kind of start and end is. Finish there. Keep going. Then building these over the top and just that nice and lightly, and then you can build them up much darker and you kind of feel much more confident about where you've put it. And that's a lot of it. Then you'll want to build that up. And if there's like literally a dot or something, mark, and just go in and just explore that brush like mark making side of things. Keep popping what bits on where you can see them. The other thing is because it's quite there's quite a lot going on, you will need to just have a step back from work, hold it from a distance for a bit and have a little look because we can get so into the detail that you maybe are not, you've stopped seeing what's going on underneath it. You might want to take a bit of a just a little look back for a moment to see, because it looks different. It'll look different from look a bit different from a distance. What about? It's really enjoyable creating those shapes. I think it really does help us look at how light catches on these very clear wrappers and things. So it's a whole different way of looking. So it will give us a good idea just to do a little study of how different things catch the light, especially because that's what artists are always trying to capture, is how the light goes on something. I think you're doing that really well by just building things up a little bit. As I said, you can always go back. I think I'm probably going to stop there and check to see how you're getting on with that as a final pour. So just move this back on the board. So it always looks a bit different when the paint's on it as well. And it will help. So the other thing you can do is if you feel like you've really lost like all of the shadows and the tones. If you say you wanted to think, oh no, I can't see any shadow on that anymore, then you can always just carefully pop it back in. So I could go back in here if I thought, oh no, I've gone over everything and I can't see those dark bits. Just use a nice fine brush and just gently pop them back in, just to give you, the edges a little bit more definition. Or as I said, where the shadow is, you might think, oh no, I've lost all of that, I can't see it, and I want to put tiny bit back in. And you can always go back and do a little bit with the acrylics. You can always put a bit more light over the top of it as well. But that's quite helpful, because sometimes we do get a bit like, oh my gosh, there's the light, and get going on it, and you think, oh no, I've covered everything. But that's okay, that's natural. It's just because we've unlocked this amazing ability to really observe everything. But I hope that's been really helpful, and I'm going to take a final pause there. And I hope you enjoyed that, and come and see how everybody's doing for a final time.